Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat berjumpa kembali dalam diskusi Komunitas Pembelajar Islam atau Kupas. Kali ini kita dalam edisi khusus atau spesial karena kedatangan seorang tamu istimewa. Beliau adalah Vltchek, seorang filsuf, penulis sekaligus filmmaker. Dia telah banyak melakukan perjalanan ke berbagai negara, termasuk Indonesia. Dia juga banyak menulis tentang negara-negara yang dia kunjungi. Dan tulisan-tulisan beliau antara lain sudah diterjemahkan ke dalam bahasa Indonesia, dan salah satunya antara lain bisa dibaca di indopress.id. Beliau juga sangat produktif dalam menulis buku. Beberapa buku yang telah terbit, di antaranya berjudul The Archipelago of Fear. Ini buku tentang Indonesia, perjalanan beliau atau Andre ini di Indonesia, yang telah diterjemahkan ke bahasa Indonesia dengan judul Untayan Ketakutan di Nusantara. Di Indonesia, beliau juga pernah meliput di Aceh dan di Timor Leste ketika terjadi konflik di sana. Karena memang Andre ini juga selalu hadir paling tidak di beberapa wilayah konflik di dunia ini. Beliau lahir di Saint Petersburg.
Leningrad.
Oh, Leningrad. Oh, yeah. the old name.
Well, the real name.
Oh, the real name. Tapi beliau mengatakan bahwa dia seorang internasionalis, tapi bukan berarti berumah di atas awan. Justru beliau ada di mana-mana. Beliau pernah hidup di Peru, you live in Peru, Chile, di Meksiko dan Amerika Serikat.
Samoa, Kenya, of course, Africa for 4 years.
Oke. Beberapa karya beliau yang bisa saya sebutkan di sini antara lain adalah Revolutionary Optimism, Western Nihilism, The Great October Socialist Revolution, Aurora, ini sebuah novel, dan buku best sellingnya yaitu Exposing Lies of the Empire. That's it about you, Andre. Welcome to Jakarta.
Thank you so much.
I'm sure it is not for the first time for you to Indonesia.
No, I'm coming here for about 25 years already.
It is said that you are always restless and anxious whenever you coming to Indonesia. How come?
Well, there are many reasons. One of the reasons is that actually everything that I am is or was forbidden, illegal. So I'm a communist, and communism is forbidden. I am quarter Chinese, and my culture, Chinese culture, was banned here after 65 for many decades until Gus-Dur came to power. I'm atheist. That's illegal, I think, too, so far. So basically, everything about me is illegal. Plus, I also think that Indonesia is a country that is probably as far as it could be from my idea of the ideal society, and more far away from the ideal society it is, more engaged I get, because I see. So I'm not here as a friend, and I say it to everybody, I'm not here as a friend. This is a country which betrayed. It's a country which adopted the most horrific form of capitalism. It's a country which serves the Western Imperialist interests. So I'm not here as a friend. I'm here as somebody who hopes to document the horror in which this country is living, and also send a warning to the world. What happens to the country which embarks on the capitalist right-wing path? So it's a warning to the world, to people in Latin America, to people in the Middle East, to people in India, to people in China. What would really happen? How would the capital city, how would the country look if you fully abandon it to the markets and allow it to be controlled by Western and, let's say, Saudi imperialism.
Okay, let's leave the Indonesia for now.
Yes.
I would like to know why we should dissect or unravel the Western imperialism or the capitalist fundamentalism, as you often write.
Yes.
And why should we undust the banner of revolution or the banner of the flag of progressivism?
Look, the Western imperialism is the only problem which our planet has. Anything else, if this is resolved, if the Western imperialism can be stopped, all other issues are easy to solve. Countries would find a common language how to take care of their differences. The Western imperialism so far accumulatively, directly and indirectly killed about 1 billion people. Not Satu Juta, not 1 million, 1 billion. That includes the colonialism, famines that were triggered by colonialism, coups, all sorts of massacres and slavery that destroyed lives of tens of millions, hundreds of millions of people all over Africa. It's the most horrible thing that our humanity ever created. It was never fully addressed, and I have to say that the West itself, particularly Europe, is ignorant about its horrible deeds. I worked in 160 countries all over the world, and I know Europe very well. If I go to Spain, and I want to talk about what they have done to the much more advanced civilizations than theirs, that were pre-Columbian, I don't even want to call it Latin America, because it was not Latin America, but the continent that they colonized. It was much more advanced, it was much more civilized, and these were mostly communist societies, long before Karl Marx was born. What they did to India, subcontinent, is just horrific. What they did to the Middle East is horrific, but especially what they did to Africa. And if you talk about Western imperialism here, we are in one of the darkest parts of the world, one of the most horrific parts of the world in terms of the modern history. I just came from tiny, not tiny, but in terms of population, tiny Laos. I used to work in Laos in the demining areas of Plain of Jars. Laos was carpet bombed, more bombed had fallen on Laos than on entire Europe and Japan during the Second World War, only because there was a fear in the West that maybe it can go communist. And so they bombed the country to the ground, and so 250,000, 300,000 people died in a country which had only, at that time, 2 million inhabitants. They were bombing from B-52s like water buffaloes and just about everything. But that's nothing if you compare to what they did to Cambodia, where they talk about Khmer Rouge, but in reality they themselves killed many more people than Khmer Rouge, and they opened the doors for Khmer Rouge by carpet bombing and famine that followed. Vietnam. So right there you have 6-7 million people in Southeast Asia. Look what they did in Thailand. Thailand was killing their own left-wing people, burning them alive in the barrels of oil. They were shooting to students of Thammasat University as they were escaping a campus through Chao Phraya River. The Navy, Royal Navy was shooting students in the water. Look at Indonesia, the most horrible massacre of the 20th century, and a country that committed 3 genocides. One on its own people in 65, one on Timor Leste, and one on Papuan people, ongoing genocide right now. So we are in the part of the world which suffered horrifically, probably the worst, if you know, together with Africa and the Middle East, of any part of the world from Western imperialism. But we are also in part of the world where people do not understand, they don't realize the conditions in which they are and the suffering which they underwent. So the Western advisors, Western pop music, Western Hollywood junk, Western junk food is all dominating so-called culture in Southeast Asia. People are getting fat. People are dressed like shit. Now there is almost no culture left. The misery is absolutely undescribable, at least here, and no knowledge about this. So this part of the world is suffering from the modern days imperialism. Entire islands like Borneo are locked out, poisoned, the rivers are destroyed by mercury. I'm working now in Borneo, making a big documentary film and writing 2 books about the island. I never saw anything like this in my world. I worked in Amazonia, I lived 4 years in Africa. Sure, there is a problem with deforestation, sure there is a problem with pollution, but there is nothing on the scale of what you see in Indonesia, but also what Malaysia had done with its nature. It's just Malaysia is much richer country, so it does it in much softer way. They at least give some money to the poor villagers, and they give them schools and education and medical care. But here they just rob them with bare face, and people are applauding here. They think it's great, Sabbath great. You know, the gold mining, fantastic. So there is not even a condition. So this is all a result, to answer your question, of the Western imperialism, the education or lack of it, the plunder, the compliance with the colonialism. All that.
Is there any hope, any optimism to those horrific scan you mentioned? Is there any optimism, any hope?
In this world?
Yes.
Yes. We are winning. The opposition to this is winning. If you ask me here, I say not yet. I don't see any hope yet. But if you ask me from the global perspective, of course, why do you think the West is accelerating its propaganda against China, against Russia, against Iran? Because it knows it is losing. Our media are more powerful than theirs. The people even in their own parts of the world are watching us. They are watching RT, they are watching Press TV, they are watching CGTN, they are watching Al Mayadin if they are Arab speakers. They don't want their propaganda anymore. They know that there is propaganda, not at least educated people. If you are in London, if you are in New York, people begin to watch our, I call it counter propaganda. The countries like Russia, like China, like Iran, but also like Venezuela and Cuba and Syria, they made a grand stand and they said, no, we will not allow you anymore to put our countries to the level when Russia, like under Yeltsin, or China under this appeasement period, when they were trying to appease the West by all means, or Iran, or Cuba or Venezuela. These countries said, no, if you will provoke us, we will fight you. We will stand against you. And what I see in Syria is that I always describe the city of Aleppo as the Stalingrad of the Middle East. This is where we stopped the fascism, like Soviet Union stopped fascism in Stalingrad. And the Arab people who were humiliated for decades and centuries, the Arab people finally understood and have been understanding that the Western imperialism and neo-colonialism is not something that is inevitable, that it can be stopped, that the conflict can be won, and that's why there is tremendous hope now in the Middle East. People are waking up in Jordan, people are waking up in Lebanon. They are waking up in many parts of the world, of that part of the world, and they are actually following very closely events in Syria and involvement of Russia, Iran, and China in that part of the world. Whether they agree with President Assad or don't, they know that this is totally something new, and it can totally reverse the trend. So yes, there are tremendous hopes. In Latin America, we lost
Yes,
very
it is
badly in Brazil, but we
there
won
is
in
signs of
Mexico.
the declining. Let's talk about Brazil first. How could the nation like Brazil, the biggest democracy in Latin America, the best camp of progressivism in Latin America, could let the man like Jair Bolsonaro win the election?
Well, first of all,
How
it
come?
was not really left-wing too much. I mean, under Lula, Lula was a very pragmatic politician. From the left, yes, but he was trying to play it both ways. He was trying to accommodate also the right wing and business interests. Did Brazil make a huge leap forward under the PT, the Partido de Trabajadores, the Workers' Party? Yes, enormous. But what really happened? Okay, 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, I went to Brazil again. I traveled everywhere. I went to Amazonia, to the deepest jungle. I went to Manaus, I went to Belém, Fortaleza, to Salvador Bahia, to Sao Paulo. I spent 1 month almost traveling all over Brazil. What did I see? The country totally changed for better under the socialist government. The poverty dropped, the favelas, the shanty towns were clean, became cultural centers very often, public transportation, medical care, education, all was there. So I talk to the people somewhere in the jungle. How is the situation? Oh, it's much better. It's much better. But Dilma has to go. Oh, okay.
The same people said that.
Okay, yes, but Dilma has to go. I go to Belém, I go to Salvador Bahia. Salvador Bahia is a center of the greatest music in the world. All great musicians from Brazil come from there. It's a black city. Before, very poor, very poor. Jorge Amado is from there, big writer. You know, Gal Costa, all these people were beginning their career there as musicians. It was full of great theaters, but also full of shanty towns, horrible slums. Now slums were cleaned, the situation much better. Again, the same thing. Yes, are slums gone? Yeah, most of them are gone. Yes, but Dilma has to go. So I went to Sao Paulo and I talked to my friends finally, my intellectual friends in Brazil. I said, what's happening? Well, so what's happening is actually the same what was happening in Venezuela since the beginning. The right-wing media is in the hands of the mass media is in the hands of the right wing. We never actually managed to establish powerful media and influence the minds of the people. So, in fact, the great achievements of the era of the Partido de Trabajadores, the Workers' Party, are always kind of connected in mass media to the individual success of the people. But all the failures or problems are connected always by the mass media to the government. Now understand about corruption.
Yes, of course.
That's a very important thing. During the military dictatorships in Latin America, right-wing dictatorships supported by the West, particularly the United States, women were raped by dogs. People were tortured like animals. Thousands of people were being killed, and corruption was total, absolute. Colonialism by Spain and then neocolonialism by the US and the West in general breeded entire huge class of corrupt officials, of corrupt elites, of corrupt business people. That was all tolerated by the regime and by the West and by the mass media in the West and in Latin America. In a moment when our governments, when socialist or communist governments come to power, immediately they bring microscope. You know, so why is Lula in prison? Lula is in prison. Yeah, Lula is in prison for corruption because some construction company came to him and said, "We are going to renovate your apartment, not build, not construct, renovate." And he didn't say no. He didn't say yes either. but he didn't say no. So there was some renovation work. You know, renovation work is like you paint the walls and all that. Now these people who put Lula to prison are actually responsible for corrupting entire millions of hectares of land. But they are not in prison. They are corrupting right now. Even the deal now, you know, Brazil, Embraer Brasilia is the third biggest producer of the airplanes, passenger airplanes in the world, after Boeing and Airbus. Embraer Brasilia flies planes all over the world. They buy it. Now, what happens if Embraer Brasilia? They are going to sell it, controlling stake 80% to Boeing. And they waited when Bolsonaro is going to come to power, because Haddad, the PT candidate, would never agree on the deal. So, and that's not corruption. You see, that's not corruption. That's privatization that's being endorsed by the World Bank, by IMF, by the US, by everybody. So you see, the question is how you manipulate the information. So that's why Brazil lost, because everything was manipulated, and that's why the socialist achievements were put into scrutiny by, as I call it, by microscope, and the right-wing horrors were never correctly addressed, because there was never a mass media. Or Estado de Sao Paulo, or Globo, all these are enormous right-wing publications, the same as El Mercurio in Chile, the same as El Clarín in Argentina. The same thing happened in Venezuela. In Venezuela, after Chavez came to power, I was flying to Caracas. I lived in Chile at the time. I was going to Caracas all the time, and in the back rooms of the bars, of the pubs, journalists were crying to me, saying that we are supporting Hugo Chavez, but we cannot write about it. Because if we would write that we support Chavez, they would kick us out from the newspapers or TV stations, because we would lose our jobs. We would end up on the street. So but that was democracy. That was called democracy. And Chavez was accused of actually manipulating the press. Well, let me tell you, the left-wing governments in Venezuela or in Brazil or in Argentina under Cristina Kirchner were a million times more democratic. You would go to prison in London, which is very draconical defamation laws. If you would write what they were writing about Venezuelan government or Dilma's government, or they would go to prison in England. It would be considered defamation. But our people, our governments are expected to take any provocation and any criticism and stay still and take the punches. Well, we did, unfortunately, and this is the result.
Okay, how about Nicaragua? It is interesting. Nicaragua is a small country for us here, but strangely enough, Nicaragua is major concern for the US. John Bolton said that Nicaragua, Cuba, Venezuela are the part of the axis of evil in the world. How can you tell us about Nicaragua?
Well, Nicaragua.
How the Daniel Ortega government does that the Bolton said that Nicaragua is part of the axis of evil?
Yeah, because Nicaragua is the only major country in Central America which is standing now on its socialist principles. I mean, of course, Salvador, that can be argued, but they destroyed socialism in Honduras. They basically overthrew the government. One thing to understand the Nicaraguan issue, you have to understand that every country in Latin America, every country, okay, from Dominican Republic to Chile and Argentina, whenever they elected democratically their left-wing government, it was either overthrown or the president was killed or something else would happen, invasion, coup or whatever. There is not one country that's just, if somebody believes that there is any democracy that is coming from the West, all they have to do is to look at Latin America and they will understand. They only respect democracy as long as people elect right wing. When they elect left wing, they overthrow the government. That's their perception of democracy. Now, Nicaragua, this is a so-called second Sandinista government.
Second Sandinista.
The first Sandinista government was destroyed by Contras, was destroyed by direct insurgency that was paid and supported by the West, by the United States. It came from Honduras. It came from the bases were in Honduras, but even so-called neutral Costa Rica was not really, innocent. I was based in Costa Rica for a while because I was investigating this entire thing. It was incredible how after the Daniel Ortega decided to step down from because he wanted to prevent this country, avoid more bloodshed. The West was fully supporting candidates like Aleman, all these right-wing presidents. And when I talked to the people who went to elections, they were all supporting Sandinistas, and they were voting so-called under the barrel of the gun. Because the US Embassy openly said, if you are going to again elect the left wing, there will be civil war. And civil war is what in Latin America? They support death squads that rape children in front of their parents. They support torture, disappearances, and everything. This is a civil, it's not just civil war when man is fighting man. They use all kind of horrors. And that's when you talk about Western or imperialism, or when you talk about colonialism of the United States or Europe. That's what they also don't tell you. You see it very often as abstract thing. No, it's very concrete. They use the terror tactics of the most low and horrific means. So now, after a period of time, Daniel gets elected again. But it's different Daniel. It's not the same Daniel Ortega as a fiery president who had Ernesto Cardenal as a minister of culture, a great poet of Nicaragua. It's not a Daniel Ortega that was described by Salman Rushdie in his Jaguar's Smile book at the time. No, this is Daniel Ortega who discovered Christianity, who is kind of playing both ways of the Christian church or Catholic church. So he mellowed down, but even that is bad enough for them. Even this is not enough for the West. They want total submission. Naively, here in Indonesia, in the Middle East, some people think that what the West wants is oil and natural resources. No, this is pathological state in which the West is, and what they need is a total submission. Oil is a co-product. I mean, they know they will get oil, they will get everything once they control, but they want total submission. If you don't submit as a country, they destroy you. They destroyed my country. They destroyed Soviet Union in Afghanistan, and then through absolutely false propaganda, bombardment, and then through this idiot Gorbachev, and then through the alcoholic president Boris Yeltsin. They got my country broken to pieces when Russia, the biggest part of it, had a life expectancy under Yeltsin on the level of sub-Saharan Africa. Can you imagine? They reduced the life expectancy of man of Russia, a country with one of the highest human development indexes in the world, to some 57 years or 55 years, I forgot. When I visited Russia during those days, what did I see? I saw scientists in Novosibirsk selling their libraries in bitter cold in the underpasses of metro. I saw old people freezing to death behind their doors. I saw miners lying down on the rails, basically not getting, as a protest, blocking the trains because they didn't get paid for months. This is Russia that I could never imagine. And this is Russia which recovered very quickly and became once again one of the richest countries on earth, and with the Soviet communist foreign policy after it abandoned the Western imperialist dictate. So the same in Latin America. Nicaragua is the country which actually was terrorized by the West, which went through the experiment of the right-wing governments between two governments of Sandinista. And it's a country which decided to risk its existence, its survival, by electing again the government which was at least guaranteeing some basic human decency to its people.
Okay, let us now talk about Middle East. What is happening there? Is there the war between the Western capitalism camp against the progressivism camp, or just the war between the tyranny in Syria, the tyranny? I mean, what the West call tyranny of the Bashar Assad government, or the rebellion of Houthi in Yemen? What's happening there, and what does the jihadists, the Islamist jihadists, doing there?
Well, one of the places where I'm based is Beirut, is Lebanon. So I'm right next to Syria, and actually after leaving Jakarta tonight, I will be in Germany for a few days, and then I go to Beirut and to Syria. So I'm very close to Syria, and I support Syrian government, legitimate Syrian government, with all my force, and I would never call it tyranny. Of course, there were problems. The Baath party made many mistakes. I think president is blameless. I think there was a problem with the bureaucracy and in the middle of the middle cadres in Syria. But the conflict was ignited again by the West, like the Arab Spring, which I covered. I was making film for Telesur from Egypt during the so-called Arab Spring. These things were fully provoked, and I was from the beginning investigating the Syrian issue, where together with our colleagues from Press TV, I worked with Telesur very closely in South America, investigating how the jihadi cadres were injected to Syria. And I was actually in the city of Hatay, in Turkey, yes, Hatay, also known as Atakia. And next to Hatay, there is a camp, refugee camp called Apayadin. And Apayadin was one of the places where the Al-Nusra and also ISIS were armed, and we tracked them even with cameras, how they were injected across the Syrian border to the country. My colleagues, very brave colleagues from the Turkish canal, Ulusal Canal, and the newspaper Aydınlık, I worked with them for many years. They were tracking these jihadi cadres all the way to Damascus, because at that time they could actually, Turks could cross the border. It is not a secret. I go to Turkish-Syrian border twice a year. We talk to people. Everybody knows everything. And basically, the same principle was applied as in Afghanistan and elsewhere. Is that basically any country that is standing against the Western interests has to be destroyed. It's a very primitive concept, but it's a very simple concept. I mean, it can be a communist country like Cuba, socialist, communist, revolutionary country like Venezuela. It can be a communist country like China. They will always unleash all the attempts to destroy anything from the left. But also, it can be something that defends interests of their own people. So, Iraq would hardly be called under Saddam Hussein a communist country. But what was the biggest danger of Iraq to the West? Because Saddam Hussein and his Ba'ath party there were building hospitals, building schools, they were building infrastructure, and so on. And that's already bad. That's very bad, because you're supposed to give all the money to the corporations and to the European and American interests. You're not supposed to do anything for your people. Therefore, what we see in Central America is under right-wing governments is the difference between standard of living of Washington and, let's say, Tegucigalpa in Honduras is 25. Washington is 25 times richer than people in Honduras. People in Prague, in communist Czechoslovakia, were 50% richer than people in Moscow. Because Russia, Soviet Union was allowing the satellite countries to be richer than the center. But the West never does. So when Iraq or also Syria now, but also Libya in the past, was trying to do something for its people. Like Syria has the best education in the Middle East. It has the best curriculum in the Middle East. It treats everyone like Palestinians, for example, like brothers, even when schools were bombarded and destroyed. And I know it from my comrades from UNESCO who worked there. They actually told me that, and they wrote about it, that the Palestinians were treated equally, unlike in Lebanon. They were treated equally in Syria, given access to the education, to everything. And they were in total solidarity with all the struggles of the people of the Middle East who were under the boot of the West or Saudi Arabia. So basically, this is the situation. It is a conflict. It is. I don't believe in capitalism. That capitalism is the only conflict. I had this discussion with great thinker Samir Amin, who just died in Moscow and Beijing. He's a great economist and philosopher, Egyptian, French. We spoke side by side in Beijing and in Moscow, and his theory was, that's where we disagree, his theory was that capitalism is responsible and it creates the global kind of denomination that is destroying the world. I say no, it's cultural. Capitalism is a product of culture. It's a product of Western culture of imperialism. Therefore, it is actually the byproduct of the attempt of the West to fully control the world in a very fundamentalist, very fanatical, by the way, manner. So the Middle East is now, the conflict is between the forces in the Middle East that are resisting and that finally found hope in Syria and elsewhere, that are resisting Western imperialism, and the parts of the world which are like Indonesia in the Middle East, which totally submitted themselves to the West and its geopolitical and also economical interests. So this is, it's very similar situation in many parts of the Middle East as here. You know, education is not for knowledge, education is for brainwashing. Universities are to brainwash people. So actually people who go to universities, the elites, they are less knowledgeable about the things than the people from Kampung. Kampung knows something at least. But everybody in upper class Jakarta, they have no knowledge of the same thing there. Everybody, I was told once by one professor of economy in the American University of Beirut, AUB, very famous university. Everybody from the Gulf either studies here or they dream about studying here. Well, sure enough. And what do they learn? So everybody thinks the same. Everybody is basically educated in the same way, and there is no there is no hope in these countries. In the countries where at least some resistance is possible, Syria, Iraq and Libya, there was a hope. They destroyed hope in 2 places, it's still left in Syria. We will see what will happen. Iran, of course, is another place, but I'm reluctant to call it, it's not an Arab country, of course, but it is kind of geographically Middle East. But definitely Iran represents great hope as well.
Okay, going back to Middle East, it is interesting that the so-called Islamist jihadists are side by side with the Western imperialism, or even with the Israel. Can you tell us about this, historically and politically?
But that's very logical. I mean, I write about it already for many years. I mean, what is the most fundamentalist, most non-spiritual wing of Islam? Wahhabism. Who supports
the non-spiritual wing?
There's no spiritualism. It's just based on repetitiveness, on rituals. It's not Wahhabism is not a form of Islam which makes people think about God, or which makes it's just it makes you perform rituals and to be obedient. So who injected this? Who injected Wahhabism into Islam? Who helped to spread it? United Kingdom, the Brits. They were absolutely enchanted with Wahhabism. Jolly good fellows. Now, furthermore, who made sure that the custodians of two of your holy sites, Makkah and Medina, are under the House of Saud? Brits, who defeated Ottoman Empire before it was in the hands of the Jordanian royal family, which was spiritual, which was under their custodianship. Islam was very spiritual, very thoughtful religion, very socialist religion, remember. Then what did they do? They took it away from Jordanians and they gave it to House of Saud. What is House of Saud? They're bandits who were attacking caravans in the past. I mean, and they knew it, and it's the reason they did it, because they always put the most horrific rulers as their lieutenants. Idea was what? Why? Why did they do it like that? Well, because logically, if you have Islam, which is not really flexible, which is based on fear, which is based on repetitiveness, and which doesn't teach people about socialism, then people are afraid to protest against the distribution of the natural resources. And they are not going to protest against... they connect Islam to politics, so the rulers are of the same type, and then they hold the nation in fear, so the economy is also in the hands of the West, of the capitalism. So there's one thing. The other thing, the West used Islam clearly already since the Afghanistan. I mean, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, I don't know if this made the news here in Indonesia, but I definitely wrote a lot about it. He went public and he declared that the West used Saudi Arabia to spread Wahhabism all over the Muslim world so they could fight communism. And he said it publicly. So basically, what does it mean? In Afghanistan, there was a socialist system, like your country was socialist before 1965. Like Iran was a socialist country under Mossadegh. So what did they do? The resources were, of course, in the hands of the government and all that. Afghanistan, where I work a lot, is incredibly collapsed country now. It's under the Western occupation. It's the poorest country in Asia. But in the time of before the so-called Soviet invasion, and even after, it was very progressive. Women were teachers, there were cinemas, there was public transportation, trolley buses from Czechoslovakia, sports, everything. It was a very nice country. If you see the photos, you want to cry. When you talk to old people, you wouldn't believe it. So what did they do? That was too dangerous for them. And of course, Brits also never forgave Afghanistan for defeating them. So they employed Saudis, they employed the jihadists to destroy, to first radicalize the people of Afghanistan, and then to destroy all the Soviet influence and socialism. Soviets had no choice, they had to come there, because they were bound by the agreements, international agreements. Brezhnev knew it's a trap. Now then the archives are open, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Soviet Union, the leadership, they were very scared to go there. They suspected it's a trap. At the end they went, it was absolute disaster. And that's actually where Soviet Union collapsed. But unlike what you think about Afghanistan, what they told you how brutal Soviet Union was, it's nonsense. I go to people there, I travel all over Afghanistan just with the Pashtun hat. I have no bulletproof vest. I have my Pashtun brother. When it's Ramadan, we drive, he sleeps at the back, I drive myself. I tell them I'm Russian, you know. I have other passports, but I tell them I'm Russian. He said, go tell people you're Russian in Russian and see what will happen. I said, no, they will kill me. No, try. Mm-hmm. I go to Pasar, I go to villages, half of them occupied by Taliban. I say, я русский, I'm Russian. People come, they start crying, they hug me, they drag me to their houses. They don't want to let me go, they want to feed me. My driver stopped taking money from me. He's very poor. I have to hide money in his dashboard of the car because he refuses to take money from me, because he thinks I'm fighting for his country. So it's unbelievable lies. I mean, the people in Afghanistan understood what's going on and what happened to them. And the same thing happened also in other parts of the Arab and Muslim world. They understand, they're beginning to understand, but not everywhere, not here, of course. So Islam was used, and it is used until now. I tracked your jihadi cadres here. It's very interesting because I tracked one jihadi cadre here who went to Afghanistan to fight as a mujahideen. He met Osama bin Laden, he was arrested, he was fighting there, all this. He came back to Indonesia. What did he do? He and his comrades began fighting in Ambon and in Poso. Then he got too old, so he became a teacher of the new generation. So they raised, educated people for Syria. And these people of Syria went to Syria, they got kicked out after they got defeated by us. And now where are they? In Afghanistan. In Malawi. In the Philippines. Marawi, yes. I was in Marawi working there. I was one of the few people allowed to go to the front line when it happened. I was told by the army, it's all on the record, that they were Indonesian, Malaysian jihadi cadres. And it is all part of the... So your country is actually where Islam is absolutely kidnapped for capitalist reasons and also for extreme anti-progressive forces in your, one would think, fraternal countries, which should be the Middle East, you know, like Afghanistan, like Philippines, the Muslims of Philippines from the south. So it's it is very, and so the West is really supporting Islam. Let's remember, the West is supporting religions, period. It's not only Islam. You go to Surabaya, what do you see? Surabaya is the second city with the biggest number of Pentecostal Christians and the prosperity gospel. These are fascists. These are people who born in Brazil. This is the Bolsonaro is connected to these Pentecostals. I know these Christians in Surabaya. They rent the rooms in malls for 3,000 people. I filmed it for Telesur, for Latin American TV station. They go there, little St. George with the sword, and woman priest comes there. She said, and God hates the poor. and that's why they are poor. And God loves the rich, and that's why they are rich. I have it on the camera. If I wouldn't film it, I wouldn't believe my eyes. I always say, in these cases, I believe my lenses of the camera. You know, I don't believe my eyes. This is crazy. Okay, but so they support this kind of stuff. They support extreme Buddhism. They supported extreme Hinduism in Bali during '65.
They always supported the extremism.
Extremism. My Indian intellectual friends, when they come to Bali, after that they are rolling on the floor for 2 weeks. They cannot believe it. They're laughing. It's totally extremist. What they practice there. And so it is in Indonesia. All denomination of religion is extreme, and it's not only in Indonesia. They do it the same in Africa. These Pentecostals, the prosperity gospel, I saw them operating in Africa, I saw them operating in Brazil, I saw them operating in Oceania, in tiny countries like Marshall Islands, like Tonga, like Tuvalu. All these places, they're like these guys, white guys from Europe or United States, they come there and they have the black name tag and it says Jesus Christ.
Okay, Andre, you just mentioned Iran.
Yes.
Iran has just received the more severe sanction from the United States. How do you see? Can Iran survive this sanction?
Of course can. I mean, Iran is a very powerful, very proud nation. Look, I am not a Muslim, but I study Islam. I have many Muslim clerics who are my friends, and I was a friend of Gusdur, for example, and all this. I'm very interested academically in Islam. I know what is happening in Iran. It's not really only Islamic revolution. It's a socialist revolution. Ahmadinejad was a very close friend of Hugo Chavez. Iran is closely united to all progressive forces in Latin America. I proudly appear on the Press TV all the time. I proudly work with them and support them, because I really think Iran is a wonderful country which is totally bizarrely discredited in Western mass media. It's very determined, very powerful, but also it's really great culture. I mean, these people have thousands of years of culture. It is one of the greatest cinema in the world. Some of the best films are made in Iran. Some of the greatest thinkers now are from Iran, educators. So it is a very determined nation. Iran is also not afraid of one thing you don't know about Iran. You think about Iran again as some kind of a failed state maybe, because they tell you this. Look at the UNDP, Human Development Index. See where Iran is. Iran is one step from the highest development index bracket. One step. It's despite sanctions, despite everything. The country it's a first world. It's a first socialist world. So this is, if it would do it like with all the oil and all this, fine. But it did despite everything. It's very proud. So every time I go there, I'm very impressed with the nation. Tehran is great metro. It has great public parks. It has great museums. You think about it as some kind of a Muslim extremist country. Nonsense. It has galleries. It has museums. It has concert halls. It has theaters that you don't have here. Real functioning drama theaters. It has some of the best cinemas. I was in a cinema museum which is bigger than any museum you have here. I go to a cafe. A couple is touching hands, caressing each other, and then I go out of the cafe, and what do I hear? I hear Manu Chao playing from the speakers, marijuana illegal, This is Tehran. So it's not what they tell you it is. It has high-speed trains. It's de-dollarizing. It will go with us. It will go with China and Russia. And Turkey too. They will wake up. They're waking up now. So, I mean, there is a big block of the countries, and Iran is part of it. It's not going to survive on its own. It will survive with us. It's our sister or brother, whatever. They call me brother. They call me from TV. They call me brother. They know I'm not Muslim, but I'm brother to them because we are fighting the same struggle. You know.
You have been travel through the Southeast Asia nation.
All over, everywhere.
Laos, Vietnam.
Not only travel, I lived in Hanoi 3 years.
So, what do you see about the socialist or progressive camp in this region?
Except Laos and Vietnam, it basically doesn't exist. Except Singapore, which I call the crypto-communist country, but they don't know that they are communist.
Singapore?
Yeah, because Singapore is a very interesting place. You know, they totally screwed up the foreigners. It's now most expensive city in the world. But if you are Singaporean, they give you everything for free. You know, first household owners, they get absolutely zero credit plus totally subsidized housing. Public transportation is the best in the world, it's cheap. Culture is absolutely free, like museums, parks and everything. Of course you pay as a foreigner, but Singaporeans don't pay. It is all kind of elements of the super advanced communist country, but you would get probably arrested if you say that it's communist. So, but they were kicked out from the Malaya, you know. They were kicked out because the Brits knew that they are going that way. So I consider Singapore I'm a crypto ally of Singapore, which I believe is a crypto communist country, but it's a top secret, you know. So we don't talk about it. But we don't, again, capitalist means communist ends, you know. They put great research institutes, ports, airports, make money and then they share it with their people, you know. I think it's brilliant. It's basically, you know, and I say, okay, well, if you are Singaporean, you know, wherever you stand politically, you know that if you really cannot stand Singapore, you will make it anywhere in the world because you are healthy, you are educated, you speak several languages, you know, you have money, and you have Singaporean passport, which is one of the best in the world. So even if you decide to leave Singapore, you are still cool. You can go and get a job anywhere you want. Anyway, but it's a little joke. It's kind of. I don't write much. I wrote about this recently, but I don't write much about Singapore because it doesn't matter really. It's too small. But in a way, yes, Vietnam is a very complicated issue. And I would rather not pass judgment yet because I lived in the country in Hanoi. I love Hanoi, and I'm going back there probably in January or in December. I don't know, and I want to write more about this. Laos is clearly now great. It's becoming. It's back in the orbit of China. We're building high-speed trains, dams, whatever the West says. They of course try to discredit a Belt Road initiative. So I think it's great. It's going to save the developing world as it does Africa. So Laos is, building hospitals. It's educating people, building factories. So it's small, little. Well, I mean, not small in terms of population. Small country that was totally raped, destroyed by the West, bombed to the ground. Is roaring now. And more it roars, more the West wants to discredit both Laotian Communist Party and China. And more they inject the NGOs. Beware of NGOs. It's most dangerous thing you can imagine. Anyway, Southeast Asia. I will be very brutal now, what I will tell you. It's the most brainwashed. The most brainwashed part of the world, and I lived in Africa. Even if you compare slum dwellers in Kibera or Matare, where I was making films in Kenya, and you compare it to your slum dwellers in Jakarta, here people are dumb. They don't know anything, and they call kampungs neighborhoods that would be anywhere else called slums. They don't even know that kampungs are slums. You go to the places where people shit into canal and somebody is washing clothes 2 meters away. You ask Ibu whether she's poor. and she will chase you with the broom because she doesn't think she's poor. And I filmed this in Banjarmasin, in Surabaya, in Jakarta, everywhere. So this is absolutely brainwashed part of the world.
Okay, this about Indonesia, Andre. You have often wrote about Indonesia by using wording like turbo capitalism or the fascist cities, the most beloved country to the West. It seemed to me it seemed to me that your wording is too harsh.
Really? No.
Can you explain that?
For me, Indonesia is a concept. It's not a country. It's a concept which was implemented all over the world to break the progressive movement. 65 was a Western coup, and it was basically, I also call it intellectual Hiroshima. Why? Because they killed or imprisoned or destroyed all intellectualism. So the country has no one great thinker now. Indonesia doesn't have 250 million, it has 300 million. I was told by the several top statisticians, but it's forbidden to talk about it. So the country of 300 million people doesn't have one great writer, doesn't have one great filmmaker, doesn't have one Nobel Prize for anything. Not that the Nobel Prize matters much. It's subjective. It doesn't have anything. It doesn't have one great theater. It doesn't have even its traditional great art forms like katopra, like wayang, all this is destroyed. It used to be political theater in Kampung, addressing every possible issues from corruption to prices of rice. It's all killed. It's destroyed. The Western pop is injected. You have Asian country on the social level of Africa. Do you think really you have 9.9% of the poor? No, you have 90-something% of the poor. But you don't even protest against the definition of the poor. Even your government gives definition of poverty which is 2.5 times lower than the World Bank. But in reality, definition of extreme poverty is if one of 7 basic services is not met by the government. 95% would be poor here if you apply international standards. But nobody talks about it. Your media is absolutely, it's degenerate. It doesn't have absolutely any teeth. It doesn't have any courage. Your basically educational system is serving the West and the elites. So where is the hope we are talking about? Jakarta is the most polluted capital city, big city on earth. So look, and there is no diversity. They tell you always since the childhood that they are diverse. No, Jakarta is what the West wants you to think that North Korea is. The only difference is North Korea is not like that, because I know North Korea and I made films in North Korea. You can talk to anybody here. Everybody, 99.9% has the same opinion about religion, about importance of religion, about capitalism, about PKI, about... I was just in Rwanda. I talked to the people there. Nobody knows anything. Nobody knows about 65 anything. Everybody is so brainwashed that there is no place on earth, trust me, that would be so brainwashed. You always find some diversity. But here, diversity is almost nil.
Okay. I'm afraid that my voice cannot be reached by that microphone, so I text my question to you, please.
Okay. There is question from the audience.
It's exactly about Indonesia.
Okay, I will read.
Okay. Please do.
I have been reading your article since a decade ago. Whenever I think I need someone to make a reality check and voicing a loudest critics about what went wrong with Indonesia, you are on the top of my reading list. Come to think of it, reading your writing in recent years about Indonesia, it's come with no surprise. We cannot argue that your writing offer more anger, bitterness, and pessimistic point of view and observation. Do you think that your political stance to Indonesia is peculiar? while so many of Indonesian and even some Indonesianists now is cherishing and celebrating their loving idol of the President Joko Widodo. Please, what is your take on this?
Yeah, of course, the Indonesians are paid to cherish and to celebrate this. They don't want to see reality. I mean, look, wherever I work, be it Ambon, be it Aceh, be it Tim Tim, be it Lombok during the riots, or here, I never see any foreigners. I never see any Indonesians. Where are they? In Kuningan, getting dictator of press releases. And real Indonesians that I know and I respect, they are not allowed to come here. Like Jeff Gunn, great historian, Australian historian, ex-emeritus in Nagasaki University. They are not allowed. Ben Anderson was banned. Billy Nesson was banned. I mean, basically people who really tell the truth about Indonesia are not allowed to come here. And if Prabowo wins the elections here, I will be banned too, I'm sure. So, look, I mean, it's basically the concept that the West is greatly cherishing. Look at Laos. Do you think anybody knows about Laos, what the West did to Laos? No. Do you think they know about Indonesia? No. I wrote now in the latest article, you can sail through Jakarta well. You arrive at T3, Terminal 3, you are taken by the Silverbird to Marriott or to Westin. You eat at Grand Indonesia, you are at meetings in office towers, and you get yourself bimbo Indonesian girlfriend, secretary, and after 2 years, after 2 weeks you leave and you think it's a great country, if you don't care. But how many people live like that? 1% in Indonesia and maybe 5% in Jakarta. So this is the problem. This is the most cynical place on earth. In Africa, you don't see such a disparities as here. You see in Nairobi, which is a service center of East Africa, every corruptor from Rwanda, from Uganda, from Tanzania, from Somalia is washing money there. But even in Nairobi, there are horrible slums, yes. But even in Nairobi, there is only one mall like Grand Indonesia. Because they at least have some shame, or if they build these horrible villas, they kind of hide it somewhere, or they at least go to United Kingdom to build them. You know, there is no place in the world where you can film in the same day children playing on the cemetery and people shitting to canals, where most of the people actually live like that in a city like Jakarta, and then see Grand Indonesia. Or go like Western, even in Mumbai, where I filmed in the slum where they filmed the Slumdog Millionaire, which is a feel-good nonsense. Even in Mumbai, there are 2-3 hotels of the level of Western here, or Kempinski. But here you have like 20. You know, there is no cynicism of that nature, and here the rich have no shame. In India they do, they are scared, because there is a civil war going on. There is a communist party democratically controlling 2-3 states always, between Kerala and West Bengal and Northeast and whatever. Sometimes we lose, sometimes we won. But there is pressure. Intellectuals like Arundhati Roy are exposing constantly the cynicism of India. But what about here? There is nothing of that nature. There is no fear. They are proud of it. Yesterday I went to Grand Indonesia. There are barriers like against tanks now. There are 2 security barriers. One is like for tanks, and one is for with the X-ray like at the airport. Against whom? Against Islamists? Nonsense. Gusdur told me they blew up themselves. Intel blew up Marriott itself. You know, it's not against Islamists. It's against the poor. God forbid they would riot. One day, God forbid they would enter. There is nothing like that. So back, what makes Indonesia so important to me, why I keep writing about it. Look, I'm not masochist, I'm not crazy. I feel horrible here, physically and mentally. But I'm here, why? Because this concept was implemented to destroy the countries that I really love. What you had here in '65, this intellectual Hiroshima and the total destruction of the left, was implemented in country which I call my second or third home, which is Chile. On September 11, 9/11, 1973, okay? But we resisted, and we won. We never let it go. We fought civil war. Mir fought civil war against Pinochet. Our intellectuals regrouped at home and abroad. You always say how scared you were here. Well, do you think Chileans were not? They were using German shepherds to rape women. And they still fought. They still confronted the dictatorship. The Chilean president, Michelle Bachelet, former socialist president, was tortured, probably raped. Her father, army general, was murdered. Of Allende.
Excuse me.
Sorry.
Sorry, yeah.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry. Forgive me, I'm late, but I don't know the place and the person.
Don't worry.
I will traffic there.
Welcome. Thank you.
Now, say one of my subjects that I studied law. I'm a lawyer, besides also economics. I learned from the history of the USA, you can become a good country because you have suffered so many things. You have endured to become a United States. You have also civil war and etc. Yeah?
They had. I'm Russian.
You are Russian?
Of course.
Oh, wrong information.
No problem. But I lived in the United States for many years. I studied in New York. So.
All right. So, to become a good country, prosperous country, welfare state, we have to have union, all of the people. And we have here in our constitutions and etc. What I ask you is about some small fractions of this country, especially the narrow-minded Islamist group, let's say is Vltchek or whatever, that they still believe in Islamic State, Khilafah. And it is, in my opinion, it's all spreading everywhere.
Yes.
It is a kind of stupidity, I think, because in the past we had the history, the rebellion from the ETE.
I know.
But now, do you think it is planted from foreigners, or some of the Indonesians are still stupid? They want to create a different country, and where will it?
Yes. Well, we talked about it for We talked about it for half an hour before you came. So
yeah.
I mean, actually, this is one of my topics. We covered the whole thing. Yes, it is, but in summary, yes, it was implanted already since the British support of Wahhabism, and then custodianship of the sites, holy sites in Saudi Arabia, which were, I mean, there is a Western attempt to spread the most intolerant Islam into the Middle East and also in places like Indonesia, so they can control natural resources, economy, and so on. So the obedience that comes with the fundamentalist religious movements is actually what the West is supporting. Where is it going now? Well, everybody is scared. Everybody is scared to challenge it, obviously, here. And, well, I'm not afraid. But then again, how long am I going to be allowed to speak here or to write about this country? I don't know, because this is becoming extremely sensitive issue, you know, the religions. And as I said before, I think it was before you came, it is not only Islam. I mean, fundamental Christianism is here, the Pentecostal, the prosperity gospel. The cadres are trained here in Surabaya to actually infiltrate China. We all know it. Okay? As your Muslim cadres are fighting in Syria, were fighting in Syria, they are fighting in Marawi, and they will be fighting in Afghanistan. And they were fighting in Afghanistan. So your religious cadres are quite toxic, you know, and they are not only Muslims, they are Christians as well. If you listen to what they do in Surabaya, these Pentecostals and prosperity gospel people, it is, when I show it on my films, people don't believe it. They think it's, I say, well, it's not me, it's the lens, I'm sorry, the microphone. So, yeah.
So, in your prediction, it is just let it grow like this, and then one day it will be destroyed by the state, or
no,
it's just a kind of
it will
dynamic?
it will destroy your state. But your people are complacent. Your people are cowards. They didn't fight the dictatorship. They let 3 million people, maybe 2, nobody knows, the numbers are between 1 million and 3, being slaughtered like animals after 65. They didn't do anything. They didn't fight back. You didn't defend defenseless people of Tim, where 1/3 of the population was murdered by your genocide. And you are not doing anything to defend Papuans. At least 200,000 people were murdered by your TNE and others in Papua, and your people only talk about Palestine. They don't do anything to protest your policy in your murderous politics. And I know what you do because I worked in PNG. I was writing a book on South Pacific. I wrote Oceania. I talked to the refugees that are what your media, what your military does to the people. They catch 12-year-old girls and they rape them, and then they cut off their clitoris and nipples. And they say, if you will talk, we will burn your villages to the ground, which they do. But what do you do about this? Nothing. And the same about religion. You will wait. I mean, what did you do to defend Ahok? Ahok, whatever I think about Ahok, it was at least a voice of sanity. At least he wanted to build public transportation, my God. Or a few parks. What did Negara Indonesia do to defend Ahok? Nothing. What did they do to defend Gus Dur, even? I mean, he was telling me until the end that people will rise and they will defend me. Well, with Ahok, you have a excuse that apparently I didn't hear it. He said that he doesn't want a civil war. Well, nonsense. Better civil war than this. But with Gus Dur, he waited after he was ousted by the coup, which was a coup, constitutional coup. The same as against Dilma in Brazil. He waited when you will defend him. Nobody defended him. Nobody went to fight for him. So your people will wait until everything is totally closed and no possibilities will be, look who is the running mate of Jokowi for next presidential elections. Everything is compromises. Compromises. And at the end, nothing is...
Do you know why? Because, in my observation, from the beginning of this state, we get the independence, our constitution says this is the country based on law, negara hukum.
Yeah.
But from the beginning until now, no supremacy of law. Tidak ada politik. Hukum adalah panglima, but politics is the supreme. That's one.
Well, yes, but also one of the reasons is that your collaborators, you never had to fight for your independence. You know, I mean, unlike China or Vietnam, which lost millions of comrades fighting against Vietnam, fought French, and then they fought Americans, and they lost. You know, after all these decades, they knew who is with the real independence and who is a collaborator. You had your independence was delivered to you on the golden plate by the Japanese because they promised. And then
I agree with you, but in the 49,
Okay. Let's
and then after 65, these people who were sitting there and waiting when their moment will come, they resurfaced because they were not destroyed. They were not in prison for collaborating. So I mean, Suharto and all these military treasonous cadres, they were treasonous cadres. Now you think whether to make them heroes, but they actually betrayed their country. As military of Indonesia, their obligation was to defend women, children, and men of Indonesia against the foreign danger, not to overthrow their own government and deliver their country to the West. So I mean, all this is complacency with the status quo that erases as you go, and it's built on collaboration as well. Islamist fundamentalism, Christian fundamentalism, capitalism, and all this is built on complacency, on the spirit of collaboration that this country unfortunately has.
I have maybe it's a last question. What's your next project in Indonesia? I heard you have a project in Palangkaraya.
No, yes, Palangkaraya, but entire Borneo.
Can you tell us?
Can you tell us the idea
Without
behind this?
details, because I have to also watch out. I have to finish the film, you know. It is, to me, Borneo is Kalimantan is the most devastated part of the world. And I say it openly because I worked all over Africa, even places like Congo, and I worked all over Amazonia, so I know what I'm talking about. I never saw anything so horrific in my life. Basically, mighty and beautiful rivers polluted by mercury, the entire island cut for summit, the mines around Samarinda just open source, and all this employing transmig migrants, the local Dayak population totally pacified, humiliated or corrupted as well. I never saw anything like that in my life. I mean, you drive hundreds of kilometers and you see the horror. And you see again the lack of people actually understanding in what situation they live. So this is my project, to show this somehow in a most, and this is going to be a book with photos and the film, and at least 2 films. So Palangkaraya is just a sidekick. But in reality, Kalimantan is absolutely, it's not even heartbreaking, it's monstrous. Destruction of the 3rd largest islands. I don't even know if Indonesians realize, after Greenland and Papua, it's the 3rd largest island in the world. And it's totally corrupt, destroyed, humiliated, and I think for centuries beyond repair, because it has all sorts of mining activities and destruction of the primary forest. Look, I'm not an environmentalist, okay? But what I saw there forced me to actually get involved. This is the first time I will be dealing with the environmental project, but it's not really environmental project. It's really political project, I agree. Everything is political here. So that's the thing I'm doing in Indonesia, and I'm also filming Jakarta, which again I see as an urban nightmare, where the city is built against the people, while in the rest of the world cities are built for the people. And this is not my quote. This is a quote of one of the greatest Australian painters, George Burchett, who came here and he traveled all over Indonesia, and he said, "My God, I always thought that the cities are built for the people, but this city is built against the people."
Okay.
Regardless of your grudge, disagreement, and your anger about this country.
It's not anger, it's yeah.
Okay. Let's say pessimism.
No.
What is your
warning?
Can you convey something more positive about us, the young generation of Indonesia?
No, especially young generation is totally skilled up.
To say?
No, I think young,
sound
the
of
old
positivism.
The old generation is wonderful. I mean, if I worked with Pramudian and Tatur, Joko Pekik, Gus Dur, even if I talk to a Dayak, 70 years old man who worked on the construction site with the Soviets before 65, these people are full of optimism. These people are, it's totally different nation. The young generation, no, I'm sorry. And once again, it's not pessimism. I'm a very optimistic person. I'm revolutionary. I'm very optimistic. But here, I'm surrounded by illness. This country is an illness, and it is actually, it's pathological. And I think that the reason I am writing is I'm writing, again, because it's important to convey the concept of this horror to the world, because it was implemented in Chile, in Russia. They try to implement it. They try to implement it everywhere they can. And they usually fail. But because this is so extremist that people just naturally rebel. They don't want Jakarta. You know what they were telling to the President Allende's people, socialists in Chile, before 1973 coup of Pinochet? They were telling them, comrades, watch out, Jakarta is coming.
Yeah.
So Jakarta is a concept. Indonesia is a concept. Your country was converted to the concept. It is nothing to.
You said it is a verb.
Verb. I'm trying to argue that it's a verb. To Jakarta. What is to Jakarta? To Jakarta should be new verb, which says to abandon the people, sacrifice the people for the interests of capitalism, of Western imperialism, religious fanaticism, and so on. This is to Jakarta. Or to Jakarta.
But the progressive camp, the so-called progressive people.
Where is it?
Where is it?
Under no in the Jokowi, the government. They are in the government now.
No, I don't call it progressive. I'm sorry. I've worked with a PRD in the past. With people like Dita Sari, Garda, Paheru, Otmojo. Look where Dita Sari is now.
Yeah.
Everybody sells here. Everybody starts talking about revolution, communism. Sorry, there is no stamina here. Revolution is a 24 hours, 7 days a week. Tremendous effort. It's not Monday to Friday, 9 to 5 job. Here people don't know how to work and they don't know how to fight. I'm sorry, I had enough experiences with this. I mean, and they are not willing to learn how to do it. If you teach them, they withdraw because there is too much effort or too much danger or too much whatever. Like this, there will be still Pinochet people governing Chile. If like this, Yeltsin would be still governing Russia. You know, I mean, you cannot do this. No, I'm sorry, there is no progressive camp in Jacobi's government. Look at him at the World Bank. I mean, in Bali. I mean, what was it IMF or World Bank?
Okay.
So I mean, I'm sorry. I would like to be optimistic, but I see no optimism, which doesn't make me a pessimist. I'm a realist. I think if I would see optimism here, I would be sick as well.
Just give us a clue. What is to be done there?
Well, if I say it, I will not enter here in December.
Oh, you don't know exactly?
No, I know exactly, but
You
they
know
will
exactly?
not let. I know exactly, but they won't let me in.
Did you just convey it?
Just read my work, and I'm sorry because if I'm not gonna say it for the intel to read, but it's definitely not. No, I will go around and I will tell you what your only great writer of the last decades, from Woody Allen to set on the camera to my in my film in Perlena, Breaking of the Nation. He said, "Bukan reformasi, revolusi."
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
It is. Thank you,
Thank you so much.
Andre, for your long explanation and deep explanation.
Well, it was a bit longer than we thought.
Okay. Never mind.
I'm flying to Kota Ibu tonight, to Beijing.
Oh, oke. Baik pemirsa Kupas sekalian, demikian diskusi kita kali ini. Diskusi ini nanti akan kami terjemahkan, akan kami beri subtitle bahasa Indonesia dan akan kami unggah ke channel YouTube di Kupas. Terima kasih, kurang lebihnya kami mohon maaf. Bila taufiq hidayah, wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.